Tim, the first question refers to the report Prosperity Without Growth, which has been widely discussed not only in UK but also abroad. And the question is, what makes you believe that in the near future politics will inevitably have to be based on a degrowth, in other words, on a shrinking as opposed to a growing pie?
The main constraint on continually growing the economy is an ecological one. Inevitably, as the economy grows, it draws on more resources from the earth, it places more burden on the earth's ecosystems, and the one thing we know already is that we're beyond the limits. In some sense, we're beyond the carrying capacity already at this existing scale. We're outside what you could call the safe operating space of the economy within a finite planet. And yet the default assumption is that we will continue to grow the global pie much the same as we have done in the last half a century, in which the economy grew by 5 times. And that would mean that by the end of this century we would have an economy that was 16 times bigger than it is now, 80 times bigger than it was just half a century ago. And it still wouldn't be an equal economy. It still wouldn't be an economy in which it was possible for everyone to aspire to a Western-style lifestyle. If you wanted that kind of world, you would actually have to have an economy 200 times bigger than it was just 50 years ago. And to be honest, nobody knows how to create such an economy. The resource base for it, the industrial structure for it, it just no longer bears credibility to think that we can expand at that rate, in that way, for the next 100 years. And so the really important thing in those circumstances is to begin to think about sharing the access to the world's resources in a much more equitable way. And what that means really for the richest nations is beginning to say, how can we get a better quality of life without using more than our fair share of the world's resources? And that's really the agenda for me. It's about social justice, it's about living within limits, and it's about a better way of life, one that is less materialistic and more meaningful.
My idea was, if the shares of the pie are shrinking, politics is no longer more about distributing increasing wealth, but it's about maintaining the well-being under the degrowth paradigm. What steps should governments take now to effect the transition to a sustainable economy that is not based on the growth paradigm? What would you ask for needs to be done now in order to prepare our societies for what's going to come?
It's not a trivial challenge. I think that's the first thing to say. It's quite a profound dilemma, and one of the reasons for that is that we have organized our economies around growth, and there's quite a profound dilemma involved in shifting from one place to the other. Even if the big expansion of the economy is unsustainable, the idea of shrinking it risks instability. So one of the really important things to do at this point is to think about an economics that isn't predicated on growth. In fact, to think about economic structure differently, to think about economic institutions differently, to think in particular about investment differently. Investment has been, in the conventional model, a way of expanding the pie, of keeping growth going. And actually we have to think about investment in a very different way. We have to think about it as protecting our ecological assets, investing in our ability to achieve welfare, well-being, prosperity in a meaningful sense into the future. And to think of it also as building transition, building the infrastructure of transition. And that would be the key place to start for me. A different kind of economics, a different kind of economy, a different sense of investment. But we need to do other things as well, and one of the things we have to do is figure out exactly where the limits lie. What kind of resource limits should we be trying to get our economies to work within if there is to be an equal distribution of the global pie. And also we need to think about the kind of society that we're creating. If we're creating a society of people whose expectations are for continual expanding material aspiration we will never achieve the change that we need to remain sustainable. So there is also a task, and it should begin now, actually to begin to instill a different vision of what it means to live well, a different kind of logic, not predicated on endless consumerism, but actually on our ability to participate in society, to live in a finite space with a sense of shared prosperity. And actually many advantages flow from that: a stronger sense of well-being, a stronger sense of community, a stronger sense actually of the individual living in harmony with their own fellow beings. And that is a task that should be started now, really, in preparation for what has to come.
Well, then the policy demands are quite huge. How do you assess the probability that our societies really manage this transition? Are you positive about it?
I think Gramsci had this down quite well, actually. He talked about pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. I think the pessimism of the intellect is really important. You have to be able to look the task in the face without shrinking from it, without having rose-tinted spectacles and imagining utopian futures. You have to understand the dynamics of the system, the constraints that sit with us as human beings, and you have to understand exactly how difficult that task is. But we also know that you know, hope matters, that a positive vision of a world that can work really matters. And the more you look at that task of creating a different kind of society, a different kind of economy, actually the more avenues you find for a possibility of change. So my sense is that holding on to optimism of the will, holding on to hope as an act of will, is a really important thing to do, because that's the thing that will actually enable us to see where change should occur and give us the vision and the dynamism to go for it.
It's a very positive note. Good to conclude with. Thank you very much.
Thanks.